everyone, and welcome to ACP's live remote non-CE offering. I'm Kelly Contreras, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. This is part of a larger live remote clinical offering calendar that we launched to provide additional remote resources and outreach to our facility partners during this time of disruption in our industry. On behalf of everyone at ACP, I want to extend a sincere thank you to all of our facility partners for providing exceptional care to patients during this very challenging time. We cannot wait to get back with you live and in person. In the meantime, we are offering virtual facility visits by our clinical program consultants, augmented by this series of live remote clinical offerings. A clinical services team has worked to create a high quality remote experience for you. Today's non-CE topic is OmniVR clinical overview with questions and answers, and will last approximately 45 minutes. I just want to begin by covering a few housekeeping points for our course today. During this non-CE webinar, you'll be able to ask questions using the Q&A feature. Those will be fielded by myself, the moderator. As time permits, we'll answer any outstanding questions at the end of the presentation. Keep in mind, you can always contact ACP Remote Clinical Support at 1-800-350-1100, option 2, or your assigned clinical program consultant with ACP questions or concerns. We absolutely welcome your. I would now like to introduce Alyssa Bryant, who will be our presenter today. Alyssa is an occupational therapist and clinical program consultant for ACP. Alyssa, I turn the floor over to you.
Hey, Kelly, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. As a therapist, but also as somebody who has loved ones in both these skilled nursing and long-term care environments, I hope you know how much I appreciate everything that you're doing. Instead, we'll just move on with our topic today, which is the OmniVR. More specifically, we're going to talk about and demonstrate how you can integrate virtual reality using ACP's virtual reality therapy system. So let's just, without further ado, let's just go ahead and start taking a look at the unit and some of the activities. I'm going to go VR. Let's give you a quick little overview, and we will start down at the bottom and work our way up. So down here at the bottom, you will notice that the unit is on wheels. Although it is ideal that you find a nice space in your gym for the VR to kind of, have as a home, it is a very easily portable type of machine. So you can go ahead if you need a little extra privacy, you're trying to do a group treatment, whatever the case may be, you can go ahead and move it to a different location if you need to. The front wheels do have locks. You can't really see those right now, but they're there. And of course, we do recommend that you keep the unit in the locked position when it's not being moved. As we move our way up, you have a printer. Not everybody has the printer, but it's a really great accessory. At the end of each activity, you have the option to print your results page. That results page has a ton of different objective measures that as a clinician, right, you might want that to demonstrate patient progress, to have for your documentation, or to help make adjustments on how to move the patient forward. However, we've also had some really fun successes just handing that results page to some of your patients. And they bring it back the next day because they want to beat their score. They want to do better than they did the day before. As we keep moving up, you'll notice there's a keyboard and a remote control. The remote control looks like a TV remote. Please keep in mind that this is not a television. It is actually more like a big computer with a very large monitor. This remote does control the monitor itself. However, it's not something you need to use for treatment. Got Velcro on the back. We just recommend that you stick that to the Velcro on the card itself and just kind of forget about it. What you are going to need is this little guy right here. So this is the newest generation Air Mouse. Now, if some of you have already used a VR or seen it in another facility, you may have seen a different mouse. This is the newest one. We find that what happens is mice have a tendency to get tossed inadvertently across the therapy gym. And if that happens enough, eventually, yeah, it's probably going to break. We'll send you a new one, and this is the one you're going to get. So let's take a look at the mouse for a minute, because I do get a lot of questions about it. Remember, there's an on-off switch on the side. Works much better when it's in the on position. And then all these buttons on the front, really the only ones you need are these three down here at the bottom. So you've got left click, you've got right click, and then you've got your arrow that moves your cursor. Left click, this is select. Right click, that can help you go back to a previous screen. And then the cursor itself, when I push and hold it, it will actually move the cursor on the screen. I don't know if you can see that right now, but if I'm not pushing it, then the cursor won't move. All right. One other thing I want to show you about the mouse is when you first get this on your initial install or as a replacement, there is a USB in this little compartment down here at the bottom. It's not this exact USB, but very similar. That's what makes it work. So you're just going to pull that USB out of the compartment, and it's actually going to go in the back of the unit, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Very simple. Plug in the USB, power it on, and it's going to work just fine for you. So that's your mouse. All right. The monitor itself is a 42-inch LCD screen. I actually do have a touch screen, which you'll see me utilize. It's a really great option, very fun, very tech savvy, right? So you've got your touch screen, and then up at the top, you have the camera. That's a Microsoft Connect camera. It is what actually is capturing your patient's movement. All right, now let's come around, swing to the back of the unit really quick. You'll notice back here, there is a box. This box is what houses the CPU. I can pop that open if I need to, but that's not something you're gonna need to do. That's maybe more for your program consultant. The CPU is housed inside. All you need are these three things right here. So this is my USB port and my USB in it. That's what makes my mouse work. You have this lovely green go button and then the blue light. So the blue light tells me my CPU is on. If it wasn't, all I would have to do is hit this little go button and everything will power on and boot up the way it should. Right? One last thing I do want to mention while we're back here behind the unit, there are buttons on the back of the monitor, just like you would see on your television at home. However, you really don't need to use these. So volume and that sort of thing on here, we're not going to control that here. We're going to control it on the screen itself. All right, so that's kind of your overview. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on this screen. So I think Kelly's going to give us a close-up view of the screen itself. So here we have the OmniVR 2 landing page. So some of you may be familiar with the original OmniVR. We did a software update, actually, I think it was about 2018 when that was first released, and it came with some new activities, some tweaks to some of the existing activities, and also this new landing page, which provides us with a lot of different opportunities for finding the most appropriate activity. So let's take a look at the page itself. We'll start down here at the bottom. I have shut down. If you're going to move the device, then we do suggest that you shut it down properly. You're going to hit the shutdown button. You're going to hit yes, you want to shut it down. And then what we ask is that you wait until that blue light on the CPU in the back is turned off. It only takes a few seconds before you unplug and move the device. I'm not going to shut it down now, of course. Now, the VR is a large computer, so you do want to shut it down on occasion. Generally, I recommend with a therapy team that maybe every Friday they shut it down for the weekend. It doesn't necessarily need to be that often. That just feels like a pretty manageable schedule. So do want to shut it down properly every now and again. All right, help menu. When you get your VR installed, you will of course get a printed user manual. But what we did is we went ahead and embedded the user manual into the software itself. So I can scroll through the user manual just by scrolling using these up and down arrows. There's a table of contents. The user manual has excellent information about basic use. It also gives you some very detailed descriptions of all of the activities that are on the OmniVR. That said, I'm going to show you an easier location to find some of those detailed descriptions. Now, while I'm here, I do want to take a minute just to mention contraindications, warnings, and precautions. When it comes to the use of virtual reality in general, there really are no additional contraindications, warnings, or precautions, with the exception of cyber sickness. Cyber sickness is a real thing and it can happen. However, the OmniVR is a screen-based virtual reality system. And cyber sickness is actually pretty rare with screen-based systems. I've never seen a patient experience it, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. So you do want to monitor your patients, of course, appropriately. When you do have to worry about contraindications, warnings, and precautions, really it comes to the activity that you're doing with your patient. So of course, as a clinician, we always need to monitor, is this a movement pattern, a range of motion, or a level of aerobic challenge that is safe and appropriate for my patient. So monitoring vital signs and of course monitoring your patient throughout remains as important with the VR as it is with anything else that we do. Okay, so that's your help menu. Let's move on to settings. This is where you're going to control your volume. So not with any of the remotes or on the back of the monitor, but you're going to control it here. I, of course, have my sound enabled, but I can disable or mute the device if I need to. I can also reduce the volume if I need to. So that's your volume. Classic menu. So for those of you that have seen the OmniVR before, this probably looks very familiar to you. And this is a great place to kind of start seeing what I can use that VR for, right? This is the way we used to organize the activities, and therapists, you know, we tend to be a little resistant to change on occasion. So you still have the option to kick it old school if you really want to. So we can use seated exercises. We can choose balance exercises. Gait training, there's upper extremity exercises, wheelchair mobility, cognition, as well as some objective measures. And we'll show you some of those here in a little bit. Now, if you come up to your VR and it's on this classic menu and you don't like that, you want a different one, all you have to do is hit that back button. And there you go. We're back to that regular landing page. So now let's move up to the top. So by popular demand, right, when we did the software update, we really do take feedback from the clinicians who have used the device in the past, right? And one of the recommendations or suggestions was to have more opportunities to find an activity that is appropriate for their patient. So we did quite a few things. You can search via functional impairment. We actually embedded the care tool, so both self-care and mobility sections of the care tool are embedded in here, as well as balance. So let's take, for example, I'm an OT, so maybe I'm working on some self-care tasks. Specifically, we're working with my patient, maybe oral and toileting hygiene. So I'm going to start with oral hygiene. Now, I know that my patient currently is requiring partial or moderate assistance. If you don't remember what that means, you just hit this little information button and there's the verbiage from the care tool right there for you. So easy for documentation purposes. So let's say my patient's partial mod assist, and I'm specifically working on elbow range of motion. And so here are some activities, swimming, volleyball, or carnival, that give the patient opportunities to work on strength or range of motion at the elbow. Now, maybe we've done our task and we want to also address some of that toileting hygiene. I actually don't have to go all the way back and do all that button pushing. I can just go back to self-care and toileting hygiene and continue to find some new exercises there. Maybe here I'm looking at trunk control is the patient's specific impairment, and there's some activities I can use and engage the trunk. All right, so you may have noticed with the self-care that that is the original verbiage of the self-care, so of the care tool itself. So do keep that in mind. I know they've added quite a few things to the care tool since then, and we'll probably be seeing those at some point in a software update in the future. All right, body part. So this is another way that you can select activities. I mentioned trunk control earlier. So my patient is struggling with trunk control, and specifically working on maybe some seated activities so that we can focus from static to maybe some dynamic seated balance tasks. So here are some activities that can help to incorporate trunk control in a seated position. So body part is another option. Cognition. So in 2018, when we did that update, some feedback was to have more options for cognitive tasks. Specifically, we wanted to make sure that our SLP buddies can be as involved in virtual reality. There's some great research supporting improved cognition using virtual reality, just like there is other more physical aspects. So there's a ton of cognitive tasks. You've got ADL sequencing, a bunch of different recognitions, pattern sound recognition. We can work memory. We can work mental math. Don't let mental math fool you. When you choose mental math, it can actually be adjusted to give you quite a difficult level of, or quite a high level of difficulty. So I can adjust all my parameters and I can work, addition, subtraction, division. It could be so challenging that maybe we're working on calculator skills as opposed to just doing it in our head. I can also make the task very simple. So there's a lot of parameters to adjust. All right, so those are our cognitive tasks. Therapy tests and measures. We're actually going to demonstrate a couple or one of these in just a few minutes, so we have those pulled out. And then finally, all the activities listed out in alphabetical order. All right, so let's start playing, right? Let's start showing some of these activities. I'm going to go ahead and start with a test and measure, right? Because as good clinicians, we always need to start with the proper assessment before we move on to our treatment. So under therapy tests and measures, we have the functional reach. I absolutely love the functional reach feature. It really does make life a lot easier. You don't have to mess with, taping meter sticks onto the wall and trying to figure out all the measurements. It just really makes life a lot easier. You have a timed up and go, and you have several different sit to stand assessments. So that's what we're going to show today. You have a single sit to stand, a 5-time sit to stand, and a 30-second sit to stand. We're going to do a 5-time sit to stand test. As we know, this is an assessment that measures lower extremity strength, and that strength correlates to, among other things, falls, for example. You'll notice down here at the bottom, I have an option to click on the instructions tab. Every activity is going to have this option. We'll have instructions down at the bottom, and when you click on it, this is where you can find that easily accessed detailed description of whatever activity or exercise you're working on. So for sit to stand, you've got literature, you've got an overview of the assessment. You also have the standardized verbiage that needs to be utilized. So for the sake of our patient demonstration here today, we're going to pretend that I've already gone through some of that initial verbiage. I've already done the demo. We're also going to pretend that my patient is not sitting in a chair with wheels, right? Because that would be inappropriate. But let's go ahead and show you the 5-time sit to stand. So I hit start. And you'll notice, look, she's perfectly in place. She's right in the box. So every activity is going to start with getting your patient positioned in this box on the screen. Now, this box is going to change. Sometimes it'll be bigger, sometimes it'll be smaller. Its location might change a little bit. This box is making sure that the camera will hone in on the part of the body that you need the camera to hone in on. Now, I do want to point out a couple things while we're here. You see this box? This shows me what the camera is seeing, and this is going to be a really great tool for you as a clinician. Anything that's green is what the camera's picking up. So I also want to notice that, or want you to notice that Jill, my lovely assistant here, is in the middle of that box, right? So from top of her head to the top of the box and all around, she's right in the middle. If for some reason you find that it looks something more like this, right? She's no longer in the middle. Now, you see this big square? This is the camera trying to pick up something that it's not supposed to. Doesn't usually happen, but it can happen with lighting or with a poor angle on the camera. So should you ever notice that this is a little off, You can very easily just give that camera a slight tilt forward or backwards so that you get your patient right in the middle of the screen. And there we go, she's perfect. Now, this is not something that you're going to have to do all the time, but I do want to point it out because if you're moving your unit or a cord gets pulled, it can happen that that camera can get offset. Generally speaking, once it's in the right position, this box down here is going to make sure your patient is in the right position and you don't have to tilt that all over the place. If you're doing it with every activity, something is wrong, call your clinical program consultant. All right, so she is in position. I'm going to left click. Now when we get to this screen, it's going to give us a nice little 3, 2, 1 countdown. So this is where I can give my patient the instructions. So I'm going to move over here with my patient. So I've already done our demo. I'm going to ask Jill if she can stand up and sit down 5 times without using your arms when I say go. You good? Oh, thank you. And go. Okay. So that is a 5-time sit to stand test. So we can do this. She did not use her arms. And here's our results, 6.9 seconds. So this results page, you have a couple options. You can go ahead and just print it. I can also pull up for some of the assessments on here the norm values. Now, depending on your patient's performance, if it wasn't that great, maybe you don't want to show them the norm values, but just know that when you print this for your documentation, those values are going to pop up regardless. So she did great. You do good. You're a normal adult. All right. So that is our sit to stand test. Let's get out of there. Now that we've done an assessment, we want to go ahead and start choosing some activities that are appropriate for our patient. Now, maybe in my assessment, I found out that Jill has difficulty with the forward flexion component of sit to stand. So let's go to all exercises. Now, like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can get to this activity, but I happen to know that I want to show you bingo. And that's a great way to work on all the different components of sit to stand. So we can do this as a completely seated task, or we can work all the way to that standing position. Now, anytime you have an activity, you're going to see this screen, min, mod, and max. And my recommendation is to always start right here at the minimal setting. Regardless of what you click on, all of these parameters are going to pop up on the right side of the screen. And if you'll kind of look as I click through, those parameters, what's highlighted changes as I go through from minimal, moderate to maximal difficulty. These are just suggestions. However, like I said, I think it's best if you start with minimal, see how your patient does, and then you're going to adjust the parameters based on their performance. So it really gives you as the clinician a lot of control to give them the just right challenge. You know, research is very clear here. When you're using virtual reality and a lot of other activities as well, that you want to make sure that your patient is challenged to the point that it's difficult, but it's not constant failure. Constant failure is not something they're going to respond very well to. So we want to make sure that they are, but we also want to make sure they're not just, practicing a task that they already know how to do. All right, so with minimal, let's go through some of the parameter options that we have for bingo. Now, of course, your parameters are going to be different for every activity based on what you're trying to work on. So for bingo, we actually have one single person or dual patient therapy. So I'll show you that in a minute. But Jill is just one patient, so we'll start here. And you'll notice right here it's highlighted partial sit to stand. So this can be changed. If Jill was just having difficulty with that flexion phase, I could do minimal flexion. I could choose moderate flexion, and we could just focus on forward flexion without that little butt coming up off the seat ever. But we're going to make her do a partial sit to stand, right? She does have difficulty with forward flexion, and the rest of it she's able to do, so we just want to focus on the first part of the task. I can adjust the difficulty. Meaning with bingo, I can make the card bigger, meaning she's going to have to do more repetitions. And I can also, if I want to add a cognitive or a visual scanning layer to this activity, I can select whether the numbers on the card are ordered in sequence or if they are distributed randomly. I can also adjust things like reaction time and how long it takes for the ball to pull up on the screen. We'll just leave everything as is right now. But I do want to show you minimal versus maximal visual stimuli. Most of the activities have this option to do either minimal stimuli, in which case the graphics on the screen are going to be basically just reduced and with greater contrast. Please give your patients a chance. We've had some really great successes where both patient and therapists weren't really very confident that the patient would be able to engage in a VR-related task, but because of reduced vision. But once we adjusted some simple parameters, they were actually able to participate and have a lot of fun with it. All right, as I mentioned, you have that instructions option for that detailed description of the VR or of the activity that you're doing. And then you have a how-to video. This how-to video is actually going to play at the beginning of every activity. So you'll see this in just a minute. All right, let's go on.
This is how to perform the exercise.
Now, if you don't want your patient to see this video because maybe you don't have them doing a complete stand, or maybe you're asking them to use their arms, you can just left click on your mouse and skip right through that video if you want. So I'm going to make sure my patient is in position. And so now, as you're looking at this screen, you can see me, right? But I'm not green. Now, if I get really close to Jill, sit on her lap, then I might kind of take over. We don't want that. We want the camera to pick up her. However, you'll see I can very easily sit on a stool, stand behind her, hold a gait belt, provide her whatever visual and tactile cues or verbal and tactile cues I need to be able to provide. So, safety first. We don't want anyone going too far over in that chair. Now, before I left click to start the exercise, this is a great time to give your patient instructions and to make sure that they understand the activity. So, Jill, this is forward flexion. So what I want you to do is I want you to lean forward. And do y'all see how the shadow on the screen is leaning forward as she does? So you are controlling this little shadow right here. We'll call it your avatar. All right, so it's going to move when you move. So let's go ahead and start the activity. Now remember, Jill only has to do a partial sit to stand. Is there a 4 on your card? Absolutely. Perfect. So she did enough of a forward flexion and got that, just barely got her butt up off the seat, and that was able to successfully complete the task. So we'll make Jill work here a little bit while we talk really quick about the difference between sit to stand in bingo and sit to stand in that 5-time sit to stand test that we just did. The objective measure is looking for completion of the task, right? How many times can you stand up, and it's a timing effort. The bingo activity is looking for a quality movement. So if Jill were to try to just stand up without moving forward, see, she can't break that flexion phase, or she doesn't reset in between, it will not be successful. So just try to stand up without bending. See, yeah, it's not very easy. But it also didn't accept that movement because it wasn't a quality movement. It's really important that our patients practice perfectly, right? We want perfect practice to re-educate those motor patterns. And she got a bingo. Congratulations. All right. To end that task, this is your parameters page or your objective measures. Every activity has different measures, and you're going to choose to attend to the ones that are most important to you. So you might be focused on, points, which in this case is correlates to the number of repetitions she did successfully. You may also look at reaction time. How long from the time that number popped up on the screen until she actually was in the standing or appropriate position. If you want this information, you do need to print it now. I could also repeat the activity with all of the same exact parameters, or I can just go back and we can do something else. So let's do that. Now, I mentioned earlier that with Bingo, you have an option for dual patient therapy. So the VR is a great tool for concurrent and group therapies even, but this gives us a great option to, I can sit down and I can work with my patient collectively or cooperatively, or I can have another patient, we can do co-treatment. And what's really great is that I can set each patient to their appropriate level. Meaning maybe Jill needs to continue working on this partial sit-to-stand, or actually maybe she's ready to start working on a full sit-to-stand, right? How many repetitions all the way up to standing? Whereas the patient we're working with, the second patient, is still focused on that flexion phase. Now, for the activities that do have a dual patient function, there's another parameter down here that we want to call attention to, and that's patients working cooperatively or patients working competitively. And it really is just what it sounds like. Patients working cooperatively, so if we're talking about Bingo, the game won't move on until both patients have successfully completed their task, right? In this case, meaning, flexion to scratch off the card on the number on their card. When it comes to competitive, however, the first patient to complete the task successfully will get their card scratched off, but the other patient will not. So it adds another layer to it. Some patients respond really well to competition. So it's a great way to just kind of increase the fun factor, really. Patients work harder for you when they enjoy what they're doing, and so you might get some really great results out of that. All right. So let's move forward and go from Bingo to the mole. This is one of my favorite activities. This is a standing gait-related task. It was created to work on stepping and other features of gait, as you'll see in just a minute. We're going to start at that minimal tab, just like we did before, and all of my parameters pop up. So I'm not going to go through all the parameters right now. Let's just go ahead and start the activity at this minimal setting and see how the mole works. All right, so my patient is in position. Go ahead now while she's here on the screen, so it's very small. You take very small steps, Jill. So this is set at an easy parameter, right? Meaning this is for somebody who is at a lower functioning level. We're working on standing with very small weight shifts and very small steps. And I give her instructions. So you see your feet. She could have a walker in front of her. She could be using a cane. I, of course, can be holding onto her with a gait belt. So we're going to go ahead and start the activity. And you are going to just step on the mole itself. There you go. So that is the mole function. And so you guys can see that Jill is only being required to take very small steps, and she's able to stomp those moles. So now let me show you how you can adjust this, right? Because obviously this is not suited to Jill's functional level. So I can adjust the parameters. Now I'm being a little bit silly here, right? I'm actually making a big adjustment. So my field size just went from 2 by 2 square to a 7 foot by 8 foot square, okay? Now let's also say Jill, in my assessment, has demonstrated that she has a reduced single leg stance on her left side. So I promote increased single leg stance on that left side. So I actually deactivated boxes on the left side of the screen. All you have to do is click on it. Anything that's green is active. If it's white, it's not. All right. Now there's some other parameters I can add. The mole is, as you saw, just pops up in a box and sits there until you stomp on them. I could add a ladybug, and that would be something that she has to avoid, right? Don't stomp on the ladybug. I could also add a mouse, that pops up in one box and then walks and moves to another box. So a moving task is a great evidence-based way to progress your treatment activity from stationary to moving. But now that I've made some adjustments, let's take a look and see if Jill has to take bigger steps. All right, so we'll get her in position. Now, so just like you did before, I want you to keep that left leg solidly on the ground, and I want you to step back and get on that mold. Go ahead and do a practice one, Jill. And come on back. Prior to this, she said that I didn't make her work hard enough when we were practicing these activities, so I promised I would make her work a little harder. All right, so you see on the screen, she's still stomping those moles, but when Kelly switches over to that bigger view, you can actually see what a big step she's having to make. Now, this might be realistically too big of a jump for your patient, but look at the weight shifting, the if I'm maybe just working on step length, this is going to really give your patient a challenge. Really cool way to work with your patients. The evidence is very clear here that a task that you learn in a virtual environment does carry over to real life. We see this with surgeons who practice new surgical techniques using the OmniVR, or sorry, not the OmniVR, but using virtual reality. We see this with pilots who train using flight simulators, so that's virtual reality. And actually here more recently, I've seen a couple studies in the last few years about, or articles about athletes, right? So collegiate athletes training using these really big, huge, cool screen-based VR systems, how they learn their offensive, defensive plays. So all of that does carry over, and if you learn it here, it will carry over to real life. All right. Let's show you another one. So let's see if we can't get some cognition involved, right? So I'm going to show you pattern recognition. Now, with most of these cognitive tasks, the first thing that's going to pop up are, hey, what do you want your patient to do to, in order to select the correct answer? Do I want to just work on, in a seated position, having flex and extend that knee, so kicking? Do I want to have maybe some trunk, also in a seated position, but they can lean left to right or maybe forward, depending on the activity? Do I want to have them reaching, or am I going to have them walk or use their wheelchair to propel to the answer, to the correct answer? So there's a lot of different ways that you can add that cognitive layer. So if I choose minimal, notice I chose reaching for this particular task. I have all of those same options again up here, so you can always change your mind. There's your knee flexion, there's your trunk, upper extremity, some reaching. I can have them walk to the task, but you also have the option of just selecting here, giving them the mouse and having them select it that way. Okay. I want to show you this reaching option because it's something that I've learned a lot of therapists that even have the VR don't always realize is here, and it's a really great way to engage your patient in a movement that is something that they're going to have to do on a daily basis. So we're going to show you reaching out to the side or overhead, so maybe like you're reaching to get something off of a counter or up out of a cabinet. But there's also an option to set it up where you can have them work towards maybe reaching down, like they're picking something up off the floor. So we'll do upper extremity and overhead reaching. And I can adjust some of these parameters, but we're just going to go ahead and start.
This is how you perform the exercise.
All right, get your patient in position. Now, what you see on the screen is just kind of like that camera angle, right? This is green, that's what the camera's picking up. This is Jill's avatar. And so the goal here is to match this pattern, to select the pattern that matches this one over here on the left. So Jill, before I start, let's make sure you understand. Go ahead and reach out to the one that matches. Very nice, perfect. Now, while I'm here, let me show you how, well, actually, let's go ahead and start it first. Keep her working, keep her moving. All right, so Jill's going to reach out and she's going to identify the one that matches. Now, y'all are noticing on the screen and via wide view, right, that she actually has to take a step and shift her weight and reach over. Now, what I could do is have her take a step or two forward, which is going to bring her closer to the camera, which brings her closer to her object. So now she's not going to have to reach as far. So go ahead and select the right one. Perfect. So now it's more trunk. She didn't actually have to take a step. Right? That one was really close, really easy. Or I can have her take a step or two back, which moves her further from the camera, which makes it harder to get to those activities. So you can constantly adjust the level of, keep going, adjust the level of difficulty that your patient has to engage in. So that is a reaching task. Now while we're here, let me show you, oh, nope, let me, hold on, we'll have to start a new one. So let's end that activity. Let me show you how we could do this with just some simple upper extremity range of motion. So maybe I want to give my patient a weight and add some resistance to this activity. So I can put a dumbbell in her hand, I can put a cuff weight on that wrist, I could give some TheraBand. Now we're just gonna make it a little bit more simple and just do some upper extremity range of motion. I can grade that level of range of motion. So we're gonna keep it very, very simple. So this is somebody who's just starting to move those upper extremities. I could also put a piece overhead so that they have to reach overhead, but we'll go ahead and get rid of that for right now.
This is how you perform the exercise.
Let's get her a chair and have you sit down. All right, go ahead and scoot forward a little bit. Thank you. So now what's going to happen is we're looking at, this is your pattern in the middle. And Jill, I want you to find the pattern that matches this one in the middle. Is it the one on the left or is it the one on the right? And you're just going to raise your arm out to the side. Perfect. Excellent job. So she was able to do that and understands the instructions. So we can go ahead and start. Now, while she is demonstrating this, I want to show you a couple options over here on the side. If I click on this little guy, you see these little microphone things that come out. That's measuring her movement. So that kind of gives you an idea as to, oh, she has to reach just a little bit further. You're almost there. So that's another way for you to kind of cue as a therapist. You also have the option to, of course, pull up the video camera view, and then you can pause the activity or you can end the activity.